Hello there. Welcome back to another episode of PreMed Playbook, and today we'll be going over the most meaningful experience section of the activity section. So, to give a brief overview, we are able to identify three experiences from our activities section to be considered most meaningful. Not all the experiences on our application hold the same weight. There may be some that you can hardly remember, and there may be others that have a serious impact on your life. And when you have gotten to this point on your application, you should have hopefully engaged in a lot of different experience and activities. But now, for the MME, you're telling your adcoms, these three right here, these really mean something to me. Not that the other experiences don't, but you could only pick three at the end of the day. And these ones that you have chosen, there's something, special about them that you want to write a little bit more about those. And if you did not know, yes, in the most meaningful experience, I think you get like 1,325 extra characters that you can, add more details about. So I like to, when it comes to choosing your most meaningful experiences, I would kind of describe it as choosing your own Pokemon team. So what I mean by that is, for example, you don't want a team of only Charizards. And if you don't know who that is, I'll pop an image right here. But it is a fire type Pokemon, and he's very cool and awesome. But fire is weak to water. So if you had a team of Charizards, you would be really weak to water type Pokemon. And you also wouldn't want a team of only legendaries. And once again, if you don't know what those are kind of the best and most powerful Pokemon, if I had to describe them. They're really impressive, but that's not always, the best fit for your team or whatever strategy you're going for. So what I'm trying to say is your most meaningful experiences should follow a team-like structure. If every single most meaningful experience is similar in experience, or perhaps the theme in all three of those are the same, then you can't really effectively showcase who you are. So once again, going to that example, you don't want to crowd your team of just the same type of Pokemon. Same with your experience. You don't want to just have every experience be similar. So for example, one is medical assistant, number two is being a scribe, number three is being an EMT. If those are just for example, those are great experiences, but all three of your most meaningful is something clinical. Or for example, maybe your first one is about persevering, and then your second one is about going through difficult situations, and then your third one is about navigating hardships. Those are all kind of essentially the same thing. They can be good, you can really write well, but you want to, showcase to the adcoms, different sides of you, different experiences you have. You just want to be, you want to diversify it a little bit. So when choosing your MME, one key point is authenticity, which means, is this something that is really important to you? You don't want to just pick experiences that look good or that you think the adcom, wants to hear about. You want to pick things that are impactful to you, that really shaped you. And if a clinical or research experience was truly transformative, that's great, write about that. But if something more, personal, niche, or unexpected had a bigger impact, don't be afraid to highlight that. As you will see when I show you one of my MMEs, I actually talk about composing music. And in my secondaries, I actually wrote about me playing a Super Mario level. So schools will read thousands of MMEs and descriptions about shadowing and volunteering, and a unique, deeply personal story like the ones that I chose to do or you may want to do, those may actually stand out more. And that can still be an experience That's the usual cliche checkbox ones, but you just want to make sure that it's genuine and authentic at the end of the day. Second is context. So adding more context to your application as a whole. So your MME should try to add depth, and not just restate what's already said in the activity section. If someone reads your MME and it feels like a copy paste of your initial description, then you're kind of wasting an opportunity. Think of your MME as the why behind the what. Your activity section, usually, but in not all cases, will tell them what you did. But your MME, can answer why. Why did you do this? Why did this matter? How did it shape you? This is your chance to give insight into, your thought process, emotions, transformations, tell a story, and so on. So, in my activity section video that's on the channel, I said that your regular descriptions should touch on those topics as well. But you are, of course, severely limited by the word count. So even if you did manage to talking about, the why behind the what in your regular description, in the MME, you are able to add further support and context to that. So with that being so, if your activity has only 50 hours, and you have pretty much said everything that there is to say about this in the activity description, then that would not be a good activity that you want to list in your most meaningful. But if let's continue with the 50 hours. Perhaps this was 50 hours, but there actually is a lot more. There's a whole story that you can tell, that you want to tell. Then it is going back to my previous point. If it's authentic and it's just adding more depth to your application, then go for it. And lastly is diverse. And by diverse, I mean diversity in your experiences. So many applicants think, and I've seen these on videos when I was, doing my application cycle. I was looking on YouTube, how to write your most meaningful, or going on Reddit, and I saw a lot of people saying that you need to choose medical experiences, or it needs to be volunteering community service. But I would say that's not true. Schools want to see what makes you unique. Maybe a leadership role in sports, a music passion, a personal challenge that shaped you. It could be an experience that played a major role in your growth. It belongs there, regardless of whatever it is. It doesn't need to be the traditional pre-med experiences. I say this every video. In my opinion, the goal is to stand out, to be unique, to be separate from other applicants. And if a whole bunch of other applicants are regurgitating the same talking points, then this could be a way for you to really stand out. But once again, you can always talk about the more traditional pre-med experiences, but you want to always have a deep, personal, unique approach to writing these. So continuing on that, here are 4 components that I want to highlight of writing your MME. So when writing the MME, you don't want to constrain yourself, to trying to hit these, 4 recommended points that I have, or some other guidelines that you may see online from some other sources. Because, these experiences are different. The impact it had, or the key message you learn, it's not going to be the same among all of them. So below are the 4 highlights that I tried to discuss in my writing. And, not every MME hits all 4 of these, and that's okay. It doesn't have to. This is just kind of serving as like a guide, parameters. So number 1 is the transformative nature. Did this experience lead to a significant change? So this could be a moment of realization. It can be growth. It can be a shift, in goals and values. So for example, let's say you volunteered at a free clinic and that made you realize, or you became more knowledgeable of the barriers that underserved populations face, and that reinforced your commitment to health equity. That would be an example of a transformative experience. Secondly, I have is impact you made. So this is about, at the end of the day, this is your application. You want to show, what you did. So, does this experience consist, of your actions having a tangible effect on others or an organization, community, so on. It's not just about participation, but about contribution. So for another example, let's say you developed a health education workshop that improves students' understandings on, on nutrition. That can be something you write about in your MME because it's really showing your impact, and also showing other stuff like leadership, teaching skills, all that other stuff that you'll be doing as a medical student and doctor as well. Next we have is personal growth, kind of similar to transformative nature. Did this experience help you develop as a person? So like I just said, this is similar to transformative nature, but I view the transformative nature component more as a change in how you view something or how much you know about something. I would describe personal growth as, how did that information or that change, how does that really affect you? So perhaps the experience, challenged you, helped you develop new skills, or strengthen the qualities like resilience, empathy, leadership, problem solving, blah blah blah. You can use the MME to further showcase that kind of growth. So for example, let's say you led an independent research project, and that taught you perseverance and critical thinking when experiments failed. Or let's say when you didn't have a mentor to guide you. Just for my example, when I was in a research lab, my PI, they went on a conference like out of the country for like 2 months. So for like 2 months, I was kind of just doing experiments on my own. It wasn't the most meaningful experience where I talked about that. It was in a secondary, but that shows personal growth. It's also transformative nature, but they're very much aligned, and you can always talk about things like that. And lastly is future goals. So furthermore, you can connect that growth that you've had, that transformative nature, that impact, you can apply that to your future goals. The experience, may have reinforced or shaped your motivation for your career, making it clear, why you're pursuing this path. I believe it's in one of my secondaries. I talk about a psychology class and how that class, kind of geared me towards psychiatry and loving the brain, and that's what I think I want to specialize in. So that's kind of my future goals. So don't shy away from sharing those connections. And once again, your MME doesn't need to discuss all 4 of these points. To be honest, it doesn't need to discuss any of these points if you have your own criteria for doing it. But this is just what I, came up for myself, and just want to share that with you guys. So now let's look at some examples that I've made. So these are examples of the 4 points that we just went over, and we're going to show what a bad and good statement could look like when trying to apply these. So first is transformative nature. And the bad example reads, I volunteered at a clinic and learned a lot about healthcare challenges people face. So, this one is bad, of course. And let's just read the good one as well. Seeing Joe struggle to afford their medication made me realize how much systemic barriers impact health. This moment reinforced my commitment to advocating for underserved communities. So, if an experience had an actual transformative nature on you, then you should be able to describe those transformative qualities. So, in this bad example, I say, I learned a lot about healthcare challenges. That is not you explaining, anything that you've learned. That is very superficial. So, what I mean by that is there's a difference between saying, I'm a changed person, and saying I'm aware of the damage I've caused and I will make it a point to be truthful from now on. Both of those statements say that you're a changed person, but the second one actually gives, details and more details that's kind of serving as proof that you actually really did change. You're showing that I'm aware of what I used to do and I'm gonna do better. That's different than saying I've changed, because changed from what? I don't know. So, you always want to, add those details. So in this example, both the good and the bad version essentially say, to the reader, oh, I learned about healthcare challenges. Except the bad version, just tells it instead of showing it, whereas the good version offers something tangible. When you talk about systemic barriers that impact health, talking about underserved communities, I'm telling you from someone who's done, like 12 interviews or whatever, they love this stuff. So be sure to, go into as much detail as you can. Secondly, is impact you made. So let's read the bad and good example. During my time in this health program, I made lessons focus on public health. Now, the good example reads, I developed a culturally significant public health workshop that received strong support from students. Some of the topics covered included medical biases, the importance of health literacy, and ... I actually think this good example is taken from one of my secondaries. I'm pretty sure that's what this is. But I could be mistaken. But anyway, we want AdComs to be eager to accept us. And a part of that is showing what we can offer to the school. These schools want students who will make the campus better. And we have the ability in the most meaningful experiences to give the AdComs a glimpse into the kind of impact we can make at their school. Many of these med schools will have community outreach programs, they have free clinics, they have youth mentorship programs, and so on. When you start writing your secondaries, you're going to be talking about all the programs that they have and why you want to join the school. And in your primary application, in your most meaningful, you can really, show the impact that you've made and why you'd be a good fit. So if the AdComs want to know if you will be a good fit at their school, in the case of this example that I just read, let's say that the school has a youth outreach program and, a core pillar is health equity. And that's not very far-fetched. A lot of these schools are very big on health equity, and a lot of them do have youth outreach programs. So if they read this bad example, all they would know is that you have some experience and possibly a similar kind of program. But in the good example, they not only know that you have a lot of experience, but that you played a significant leadership role in regards to the curriculum. And now they can visualize you giving presentations to kids as a medical student at their school. And that should be one of the main goals in our writing. Once again, this is another thing that I say in all my videos. You want them to be able to visualize you as a medical student at their school. So giving the details like this, showing the impact you made, give them the ability to see you thriving as a medical student at their school. Next is personal growth. Let's read the bad and good example. That loss taught me the importance of leadership. I plan to lead as a physician. The good example, as captain, I failed. I was expected to adapt, communicate effectively, and develop a plan. That failure forced me to grow. I've since led in tougher moments, and as a physician, I'll continue to do so when lives are at stake. So this is, similar to transformative nature, but once again, if something in us has changed or improved, we want to be detailed in our writing. So in this example, we are highlighting our growth, but it's through a situation where we ultimately failed. If that is the route you want to take in your writing, that's perfectly fine. Honestly, people often shy from talking about failures, so this kind of essay, when the approach is through a failure that you've had, it can really help you stand out. However, be sure that your writing does not come off as trying to shift the blame or like you're just trying to avoid, talking about the failure. If you can't articulate, what you learned from it. So with this example, the bad version doesn't show any growth, really. It says that you understand the importance of leadership, but if you really do understand it, you should be able to list, some examples of qualities that you think you should have or that you should have had, during that moment. So in the good version, we do that by stating what qualities we failed to exhibit, we did not adapt, we did not effectively communicate, and we did not develop a plan. This new version also takes ownership, of your failure. The bad version, this version doesn't, it doesn't try to shift the blame on anyone, but it doesn't really even talk about the failure at all. It just says that loss. So you aren't really talking about the failure. But this good one, it takes ownership of it, and that's a good thing. They want you to be, accountable. So, doctors are often leaders. They're the leaders on the medical team, so you'll be expected to take accountability. So showing the adcom that you're already able to do that, if that's something you want to talk about, that could be very good. And lastly is connection to future goals. My apologies, I actually have the wrong example for the last one, but going to connection to future goals, the bad example reads, working with underserved communities taught me valuable skills that I will use as a physician treating all patients. The good example reads, caring for patients facing homelessness and financial instability revealed the deep impact of social determinants of health. As a physician, I would draw on these experiences to shape and guide my holistic approach to equitable care. So this new example, though it may look like it, it's not just throwing, those fancy words around. The very popular terms like social determinants, equitable care, holistic approach, those are very popular, words that many med students will be, many pre-meds will be, using when writing. The adcoms use these all the time in their secondary prompts. Many of the interview questions they contain one of these words: social determinants, equitable care, holistic. But in this context, we're not just throwing it in here to look good and say, hey, I know what these mean. This actually makes sense. So this example, is just 2 sentences, but your MME as a whole is much larger, of course. So you will have the ability to add further context and explain, what exactly are these social determinants you learned about in this experience? What does the holistic and equitable care look like? These terms are only cliche when you just throw them in your writing without any substance. So yeah, if you do use, hey, I know what social determinants means, I know what equitable care means, I know what holistic approach means, and you just throw it in your writing, but you don't actually write in a way as if you know what it means, then yes, that does look bad.
Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
But if you are talking about something, or if you're talking about something almost completely unrelated, but then you just throw one of those popular terms because you think the adcom wants to hear about that, that is likely going to sabotage yourself.
What have I done?
So just very quickly, this new example introduces some more relevant terms, but this also adds to the uniqueness. You are now mentioning your view on medicine, because you say, as a physician, I will draw on these experiences to shape and guide my holistic approach to equitable care. You're now mentioning your approach, your intended, way to implement medicine as a physician. I know it doesn't look like much, and essentially all I said, in this example is I'm going to be holistic in my approach, but now they know that. They could have read this MME knowing, nothing. And, my apologies. They could have read this MME knowing nothing about, the kind of doctor you'd want to be, and that'd be a shame. You want the AdCom to visualize you not only as a medical student at their school, but also as a doctor. But in order to do that, you need to give them something to visualize. So now, let's look at one of my MMEs. I'm not sure which one is first. This is composing. Is there another one here? There isn't. Okay. So this is one of my most meaningful experiences. Feel free to pause and read it if you want to, because I'm not going to. But yeah, let's get right into this. So this one is a bit different than the next MME that you're about to see, because this one is an artistic endeavor. That on the AMC, that's what I labeled this one as, an artistic endeavor. You can think of like theater, band, stuff like that. So, regardless of that, all these points, discussed, that I mentioned, personal growth, transformative nature, relation to your journey to medicine, all that is still important and it still applies here. So my style of writing when it comes to the med school application, when I was, just writing my activities and secondaries, whatever it may be, I often like to put the reader straight into a story. And I do that here. So this first paragraph essentially is the bulk of the main story, and it serves to set up the transformative piece in the second paragraph. And for this MME, the transformative piece is really the main focus of this entire thing. I'm really trying to drive home the mindset of feeling like I belong somewhere, and pushing back against this feeling of imposter syndrome that I had. So I chose this experience to highlight that topic for two reasons. One is authenticity. So remember I talked about authenticity earlier, and wanting to include activities that is really meaningful to you. And when I went over my non-clinical activities, just the activity section in general, in an earlier video, I believe this composing, that's what this is, had the most hours. I think I have around 2,000 hours on my primary application. And this isn't, 2,000 hours of my job or of volunteering where I'm expected to put, a lot of time in. This is just a hobby. So with that being so, I must really enjoy, composing this hobby, which I do. And with that, it was easy for me to write about something that I really enjoy. And even if you aren't, the best writer, the reader will likely be able to tell that this experience is really important to you. So to just give an example, I think my second most hours is research. I think I have like 1,700 hours of research. And I enjoyed research, and I could have written something about it, but I'd be lying to you if I said I loved it. I actually, after working in a lab for 2 years, I was certain that I do not want to be a PhD. I do not want to work in the lab. So with that being so, why would I write about that in my most meaningful experience? And I'm saying that because, research, med schools love research, and you may think, or you may feel kind of forced to write about that because you may want to make yourself look good, but this may not be something that you really care about. In my case, it wasn't really something that I was that passionate about, and you shouldn't try to force yourself, to write something that you honestly don't care all that much about just to make yourself look good. Because it's very hard to write in a way that that makes it seem like you enjoy something when you really don't. The second reason that I chose to go with this MME was to do with diversity, and once again that means diversity of experiences, and that could be a really good tool for showing the adcoms how well-rounded you are. So this experience kind of kills two birds with one stone, as I'm able to write about something I really enjoy, I'm passionate about, and furthermore, the activity is very different or unique compared to the other experiences on my application, and honestly what I think other pre-meds may have been writing about. So moving on, let's just focus on the highlighted sections. Once again, feel free to pause and read this in its entirety. So transformative nature is here highlighted in yellow, and I have orange highlights are for personal growth. So I give the adcom the premise here, in this line in orange, that I don't always feel like a composer. And, they may be thinking, why? And I immediately answer that in the next sentence. Hearing other people's work, or the fact I couldn't play a lot of my, own pieces that I wrote, it made me feel as if I had no right to call myself a composer. And in the second line, I say that changed when I won a competition. And let's say, this was the ending. Let's forget this line right here. At least I thought this is the MME, and it ends with that changed when I got my gold, proving I belonged in the world of music. The end. If that was the actual ending, if that was the case, I would not advise, that, because you resolve these conflicts immediately in the next sentence. What I mean by that is, I tell the reader who it is I used to be. I don't feel like a composer, and then I immediately tell them, what my stance is now. And while those are two important facts for the AdCom to know, the details in between them, the experience or realization that made you who you are today, should be established before we get to the transformation or personal growth sentence. So now, this does not always need to be the case. I myself don't follow that rule all the time. Sometimes, as a literal tool, you may want the reader to immediately know how you've changed or what you've learned, and then maybe you'll add further context to that as they keep reading. So moving on to paragraph 2, there's another transformative nature experience, and this is a change in my view from the ending of paragraph 1. So I immediately kind of resolve this. I say I don't feel like a composer. I explain why. I then say that now I do feel like a composer, and I can do that because this is not actually the end here. So moving on to paragraph 2. In paragraph 1, I established that I basically have imposter syndrome. And then at the end of paragraph 1, I say I don't have it anymore because I got my awards now. And now, as we wrap up paragraph 2, I say, wait a minute, I don't need awards to prove that I'm a composer. And then it kind of comes full circle. And I at the end highlight my change in mindset and how I apply that, and how I will apply that mindset in other areas of my life. And this is actual, this is the actual personal growth, not me thinking I belonged at the end of paragraph 1. And I really thought that it was important that the reader kind of go on this journey with me from the beginning, being thrown in the story, to seeing the multiple changes in my mindset, and what led to those changes. So once again, just to quickly explain what I tried to do here. I explained the predicament, the premise. I don't feel like a composer. I have imposter syndrome. This is why. And now I don't have it anymore because I have my awards. And then I say, or at least I thought. And then in the second paragraph, I really show my growth as I realize that I don't need these awards, to prove that I'm a composer. Okay, so here's the second MME that I have. This is from when I worked at the public health department. Once again, you can pause and read it. But to start us off, I immediately put the reader in a story again by way of a quote. I explained that I like to do that, so we do it again. I think it's my personal statement video. I mentioned the importance of quotes, how they can be a very powerful tool. It just gives the reader something to hold on to, if they can remember what you said or you repeating what someone said. And it also shows that the experience was, actually meaningful to you because you remember, what someone said or what you said in that moment. So moving on to this line in green, this quote, it's highlighted in green because I think that it's showing my impact. Remember, showing your impact is to give the AdCom the ability to visualize you as a student there, or visualize you as a doctor. So perhaps this school that was reading this MME is very, very vocal about community health. And when reading this, they may say, hey, I like this guy. He really aligns with our values. Let's perhaps invite him for an interview. And that is the goal, ladies and gentlemen, to show these adcoms that we belong at their school. And it starts here on the primary application. So ending this first paragraph, we have this part highlighted in yellow, and this is transformative nature because it made me realize just how intricate our healthcare system is. I explained, that this was kind of a revelation for me when I just realized, just to give you a quick example, like there was different community partners, and then I just like kind of saw, when someone gets a shot at a clinic, all the steps that actually, that take place for the clinic to even be set up. And I was like, wow, healthcare really is, far more intricate than I imagined. And that's just kind of like a transformative experience. So moving on to the second paragraph, unlike my composing most meaningful experience, not all my writing here is about, one continuous, story or moment. The first paragraph is a story, and it lays out the groundwork for the main message. And I kind of hit at that at the end of paragraph 1 when I talked about the intricacy of our healthcare system. But the main theme is essentially that our healthcare system is very nuanced and requires many moving parts. And as a physician, I will have to work hand in hand with other people to provide the best healthcare I can. But I start off by mirroring that point by showing my impact at the start of paragraph 2. Just to read it, at times I taught teens how to measure blood pressure, surveyed residents for COVID vaccination disparities, wheeled patients to appointments. This sentence serves up to set up the main theme about being part of a much bigger system, but I also showcase the various roles that I've done in that system, whether it be taking vitals or surveying residents. I then add further context to the transformative nature of this experience. Remember at the end of paragraph 1, I realized just how intricate the healthcare system is. You can then see how I discovered that as I explain in paragraph 2 that I work with doctors, scientists, politicians, and so on while working for the public health department. Now remember, personal growth is how that transformative experience affects you. And I explained that I have a newfound appreciation for the unseen, heroes who work behind the scenes to expand Medicare, build community clinics, and provide essential services. So the transformative nature is me learning about the intricacies of the healthcare system as I collaborate with doctors, science, and politicians. But I grow as a person as I gain new appreciation for these, various people. And then lastly, I, kind of connect it to my future goals by just saying I'm looking forward to working alongside these dedicated professionals to make a tangible difference in our community. So yeah, just try to always, if you can, find a way to sprinkle in, whatever key message. And that's kind of what this purple is kind of like the theme wrapped up in one sentence. So that will wrap up the most meaningful experience. I usually go into a lot of detail right here when I re-talk about each of these 4 points, but I'm pretty sure this is already 45 minutes, so I'm just not going to do that today. Thank you. Next will be short secondaries. So I'm going to go over the secondary applications, what that is, how to write, them, and in more detail about the short ones. And I'll see you on the next video. Thank you.